Good victory afternoon, Steelers Nation. And thank you for tuning in to the New Standard Podcast. I am your solo host today. My name is Neal Coulong. Lance Williams is normally with us, but as of now, the last report indicates that he is with Emmett Fitzhume and Austin Milbarge somewhere outside of Pakistan. We're not sure where he is. We will give you updates as we get them. What we know, though, is the Steelers 16-10 winners in Week 11 over the hated Cincinnati Bengals at Paul Brown Stadium today in Cincinnati. The Steelers improved to 7-4 on the season, and the Bengals fall to something below 500, I believe, which really feels like the natural order of things. They typically should be below 500 about this time of the year. Kind of sad that that trend has changed as of late, but the trend that we care about, that we know about, the Steelers have broken that darn 45 game streak of sub 400-yard offensive performances. They broke that today in the first game without former offensive coordinator. That still feels good to say. Without former offensive coordinator Matt Canada, the Steelers racked up 421 yards in this game, which to other teams is more like 600. Massive improvement from the Steelers offense overall. And the thing was, they left points on the board. This wasn't a great fluid performance overall. But what we saw, as some other people are already chiming in, and please give me comments because this is really going to be a user-based show today, was this Kenny Pickett's best game? Not going to lie to you. 24-33, 278 yards. No touchdowns, and yet again, no interceptions. Passer rating, 97.8, 8.4 yards an attempt for young Kenneth today. Statistically, it certainly looks like it was his best game. There were some of his best throws this season, most notably in my mind, and I'll review it for the rest of it and bring an update back to you guys on Wednesday of what I think of that. The throw to Pickens, George Pickens down the sideline later in the game, beautiful throw. Put that right where he was supposed to put it. He had two middle depth throws to tight end Pat Freiermuth, who announced emphatically today that he is still on the team. Kenny had a lot of excellent passes today. Are we going to pin the success of him releasing and throwing the ball with timing, with rhythm, with velocity on the new offensive coordinator? I'm not so comfortable doing that. But what I know is Pickett certainly got the message that the shakeup was there, and now all eyes are going to be on you if you do not respond. I felt today Pickett answered the bell. Was not a clean game. Was not a perfect game. Mistakes were made. I will get to Deontay Johnson in a minute. Don't worry. I've been saving this one up since the first quarter. Things can still improve quite a bit, but the level of improvement that we saw certainly from last week against a lesser opponent, Cincinnati is not a good football team. They don't have guys out there that they're paying a lot of money to be out there. And unfortunately for them, this tends to happen in the NFL. If you lose a good chunk of your star power, T. Higgins didn't play along with Joe Burrow. Their defense hasn't been right all year, though I thought they did some pretty good things today. It's not the same Bengals team. They're not a postseason team. They're not going to be a threat come January. The Steelers, on the other hand, are showing quietly that they can be. Now, I went live right when Houston and Jacksonville were finishing up their game. Houston had the ball. There are playoff implications associated with that game. We can get to the playoff picture in a bit. Once again, you are listening to the New Standard Podcast. My name is Neal Coulong. We are recording this following the Steelers' 16-10 win over the Bengals in Cincinnati. Sorry, the Bengals are 5-6 now. The Steelers improved to 7-4. They are trailing the Ravens within the division with one more game against the Ravens to go. They also have another game against the Bengals this season to go. And things look up. This was a game the Steelers really, really needed to win after a disappointing but not entirely surprising loss against Cleveland last week. Pittsburgh needed to get this to stay in puncher's distance of Baltimore for the division. Something that I would feel overall Baltimore probably it should take. And something weird will happen if Baltimore does not win. getting back to Kenny Pickett, the initial question, was that his best game? I think it probably was, but at the same time, is this fair? He missed a couple throws that I saw. Offensively, I think this game was not indicative of problems with Pickett. I thought he definitely operated better. The offense was working within itself and with symmetry amongst one another, probably for the first time this season. These are preseason accolades to give a team, but this is how bad it has been for Pittsburgh so far this season. They screen passes that they ran last week, as we talked about on the show leading into this game, looked like they had not practiced it at all. They had no idea what they were doing. 5 players thought they were doing one thing, 6 thought they were doing something else. It was not. It was a big improvement over that, but this was not their best game that they could play. The fact that they got over the 400-yard mark, though, the fact that it's clear and obvious they left points on the board, that should be something you take away with optimism. Now, you're not going to, because Kenny Pickett isn't Joe Burrow. He's not Patrick Mahomes. They didn't put up 34 points. I'm waiting for the big deal, all that. We're going to get that. It's fine. Where they're going compared to where they've been is really what matters when you're looking to fairly evaluate the improvement of something. And with the Steelers, it's noticeable. It's tangible from today. One thing that I noticed that I was really impressed with, you saw Steelers left tackle Dan Moore pulling over to the right side, similarly to what they're doing with Broderick Jones from the right side to the left. They're building a left hand and a right hand in their run game, and their running game was very effective again today. Today, hats off to Najee Harris. I thought Najee Harris might have played the best game of his career, maybe not the best of his career, certainly the best of his season, and he was very effective. He ran well, he ran hard. 15 carries, 99 yards for Harris. That's 6.6 a lug with a touchdown, a long of 22, in which, if you remember that play, it looked like he and the rest of the Steelers offensive line drug him down the field. 13 carries for 49 yards for Jaylen Warren, a long of 9 in this game. It really kind of seemed like you had the reversal. Najee had the bigger carries today than Warren did. Warren was still effective overall. Add another 13 for him on 3 targets and 3 catches on the ground. With Harris, I don't think he even got a target in this game. Did he? No, he did not. A solid performance overall. 153 yards on the ground for the team. 33 carries. That's 4.6 a carry with that touchdown. That one lonely touchdown, unfortunately. Pat Freiermuth, without question, was the most effective receiver in this game. Season highs, 9 catches, 120 yards, and 11 targets. I'm bringing these up because the one thing I also want to put into this was Kenny Pickett ran the ball loosely and openly a couple times. It's not a guy that's going to do it a bunch, and they added in his kneel downs. But you add all of that in, that is really, to me, what you saw as far as the difference between what the Steelers were doing with Canada last week and the previous games compared to what they were doing today. Freiermuth got the ball early and often. They capitalized on the middle of the field advantages they clearly felt that they had against the Bengals linebackers and their deep secondary and coverage. Freiermuth was very effective in this game. We saw RPOs, run pass options. Those weren't play action fakes. Those were RPOs in which Freiermuth was able to get off the line, get his body squared, and give Pickett a good target to throw to. He got himself open. And with that, they produced quite a bit. It was the first play of the game. Best RPO that they've ever run, in my opinion. That's something they tried to run with Roethlisberger at half the distance 2 years ago, and they weren't in sync with that at all. The fact that they are building on all of this and they have new energy, even what you could look at in a vacuum as a fairly disappointing performance, considering that this team averaged 16 points a game going into this week, which is bottom 5 in the NFL. For them to get 16 out of this with a late score helping with that, it can be seen as frustrating or it can be seen as progress. Both of these things generally are true. They can get a lot better. They're going to need to get a lot better. But the talking point in this game was clearly going to be about the Steelers offense. A lot of good things that we saw, and we saw kind of similar bad things. They're a work in progress, but the reality is their next four games, Acra-Heinz Fieldium against the Cardinals and the Patriots on a short week in weeks 12 and 13. Then they're on the road at the Colts. Then they are back to Acra-Heinz to face these same Bengals again on December 23rd in week 16. They're set up very, very well here. If they can continue to build on what they're doing offensively, they legitimately could make a run at the division title here, certainly a wild card. And from there, who knows? I mean, really, that's kind of what you're aiming to do. You need to get into the playoffs to win a Super Bowl. So the idea is you want to be playing your best football at the end of the year. Another key to all of this, keep in mind, Minkah Fitzpatrick is going to be back probably next week. And I think some of the reason they may have held him out today is because you've got the game next week followed by a short week game. And coming off of a hamstring injury, that might be a little tougher to handle. They basically did the same thing with Cam Hayward. So it would not surprise me if they saw Minkah Fitzpatrick next week and he would still be available to play against the Patriots in the short week after that. One incredible low light of this game, to be honest with you, I'm really surprised more people are not freaking out about this. On a Jaylen Warren fumble in the first quarter of this game, unfortunate fumble, a nice play by the defender. Warren's got to protect the ball, but guys make plays. Deontay Johnson lined up wide off to the left side, didn't even move off the line. He sauntered is probably a better word, lazily ahead, turned his back to the play. The ball took a serendipitous bounce out of Warren's possession. I think it went off of him or a defender and bounced right to Johnson. And it was the guy that Johnson was not blocking, but looking at, who picked it up and ran it back for another 15 yards. Johnson made absolutely no effort on the play whatsoever. Johnson acted on that play the way a sulking 9-year-old would in any other environment. I don't know if you have kids or not, but when they get bratty, they just kind of don't do anything. That's what I saw out of Deontay Johnson. To me, that is flat out unacceptable. I don't care if you just ran 70 yards and are coming back. You need to watch the ball. You need to be aware of where the play is going. He put absolutely no effort in. It's embarrassing. It truly is embarrassing to the point where there is absolutely no way Mike Tomlin is not going to specifically address that Tuesday. That doesn't mean Mike Tomlin is going to do anything about it because, frankly, on the next possession, he caught a really nice ball, a difficult catch for a 38-yard gain. Something to that. I don't know if it was, I thought it was 38. He's a good football player. They're not taking him off the field because he dogged it on a play. I understand that that's most people's reaction. That's what you want. You want vengeance. You want something to shame him and call him out. This is the NFL. This isn't high school, okay? They're not into teaching lessons. If he wants to play, he can go out there and play. But I will tell you this. I would bet money right now there is no way in hell Deontay Johnson's coming back to this team next year. You cannot do that to your teammates. Not after he got into a fight yet again with teammates last week to a point where Cam Hayward and TJ Watt had to separate him and Minkah Fitzpatrick from each other. Minkah isn't even playing. Johnson's complaining. I'm sure it had something to do with shut the F up. You need to lead. Get out there and play the game. I don't get the mentality. I don't get the sense from Johnson. He is fully committed to keeping his emotions in check and going out and playing the game. Very talented receiver. Somebody's going to sign him if the Steelers cut him. But as I sit right now, I would be shocked if the Steelers kept Deontay Johnson next year. That's enough. We've had it. They've gotten rid of receivers for less than this, to be honest. I don't think you can continue to want to play with a player like that. This is a team game. I think it was in, I don't know if you guys watched this or not, but the Jason Kelce documentary that Amazon put out. I don't particularly recommend it. I wouldn't tell you to not watch it either. But at one point, they interviewed Travis Kelce, and somebody came up to him, a younger player, asked him for some type of advice. It was on the field. It was a spontaneous moment. It could have looked like it was orchestrated, but I think it was genuine. One of the first things that he said was, play for the guys next to you. Sometimes it's not about the money. Sometimes it's not about the fame and the accolades that come with it. Sometimes it's about, you're a part of a tightly knit group and you need to perform along with that group. Sometimes, Deontay, that means you're not going to get more than 4 targets in a game and you need to make the most of it. He did that today. That's honestly what pisses me off probably more than anything. You don't get special treatment. You need to do more because they want to give you the ball as much as they can because they expect you to go out and make plays. You go out and do that, but at the same time, to paraphrase Bull Durham, you lollygag down the field. And I wouldn't even say he did that. He barely moved. And the ball bounced right past you. That gave away a possession on a drive that, getting to the second problem, he scored a touchdown. And he should have scored a touchdown. In the NFL, this was 2 plays earlier to this. In the NFL today, the survive the ground rule does not exist in the end zone. If you had the ball in the end zone, you establish possession of it, you have it. You don't, if you hit the ground and lose the ball, doesn't matter anymore. The whole survive the ground, Jesse James thing has been ruled on by the league. Not going to get into it here. We don't have enough time and nobody wants to deal with lawyer talk for the remainder of the show. He had it. It probably was something that could have been challenged. The fact that they didn't, people yell at Mike Tomlin for burning timeouts stupidly all the time as well. I don't know. He didn't in this case. That's something they absolutely should have reviewed, in my opinion. I'm not going to make a big thing out of it. What I would say is probably what Tomlin said, what Eddie Faulkner said, what Mike Sullivan said. Okay, get out and do it again. But now they're going to run the ball. Now Johnson doesn't feel like he needs to put his best effort in. If I hear anything from an NFL wide receiver like, I'm tired, I just ran a bunch down the field, done, gone. If you're not in shape at a skill position in the NFL, you shouldn't be in the NFL, to put it mildly. I don't want to hear it. Plain and simple. Thank you for this, because I was expecting this as well. He just said that he didn't see the fumble. That's the damn problem. You didn't see the fumble, did you? If you were watching the play like you should have been, you would have seen the fumble. I'm not saying this is like a Cam Newton thing where everyone rips on him for not diving for the ball. I'm not saying he needs to go in, balls out, and make sure that he does everything he possibly can. He could have put an effort forward to at least stop the guy where he was. Make a tackle. You need to be a football player at some point. He doesn't have an excuse. I hope he added that as well. If he didn't see it, he's speaking the truth, because he obviously didn't. We know that because he's walking away from the ball as it's rolling toward him. We don't need to know that, Deontay. If you would speak to why you felt you didn't need to watch the play, that'd probably be more helpful. That's just me. He blocked me on Twitter, so he's not listening to this, I'm sure. But I'm not the only person that's going to be ripping him for it. That was disgraceful. And if this was a loss, I want to imagine what would have happened to him. You are listening to the New Standard Podcast. My name is Neal Coulong. I am your host of this show. Normally, Lance Williams is with me. Lance is on special assignment, out defending our liberty against countries that aren't threatening our liberty in any way. But Lance goes where he's told. Wherever Lance is, we wish him the best. I'm sure he is safe after spending some time with his family for the holiday. Obviously, I'm joking around about him being in Pakistan. There was somebody last week that thought that bit was serious, and Lance really was in the CIA. That is not the case. And if you ever sat and talked to Lance, you would know that that was a joke. The Steelers won today, 16-10, despite my rants about my favorite wide receiver, the infuriating Deontay Johnson, who played a nice game. To be honest, he did a good job in the plays that he was playing on. The Steelers offense looked alive for the first time this season. If our bar has been lowered to define what being alive is, the Steelers certainly showed that. 421 yards of offense. They dominated time of possession. The first game this season, they actually outgained their opponent. And oddly enough, the Bengals looked a lot like the Steelers did. 16-10 final score. I guess the Steelers probably would be somewhere between 16 and 10. That works out well. 25 rushing yards for the Bengals. Use that to intro into the defense. I felt I laughed at hello followers. I laughed at an early morning report that Bengals coach Zach Taylor had catered his offense basically as if Joe Burrow was starting for Tyler Browning, the journeyman, making his, I think that was his first start today. They weren't going to shade anything down for the sake that Joe Burrow was not playing. I would argue if you don't want to change your game plan for your backup quarterback, I have no clue why you just paid your starting quarterback $1 billion or whatever it was. That, I think, at the end made Cincinnati's offense perhaps a little bit more dynamic than what we saw from Cleveland last week, who was in a similar spot. They were also starting a backup quarterback. Cleveland's offense was as basic as it gets. That was high school football. It caught up to them in the end. Pittsburgh got the best of them, and in many ways probably should have won the game despite a horrifically poor offensive showing. Cincinnati had the opportunity to go into this game and steal one. I mean, they're 2.5-point underdogs at home. They had the opportunity to do that, but offensively, they refused to commit to the ground. I'm not really exactly sure why. The thing with volume stats, especially when it comes to defense, when you don't run a whole lot, it looks like you had great run defense. Well, as far as the Bengals were concerned, they ran 11 times for 25 yards, 2.3 yards a carry. The Steelers have had games like that. They tried to run. They just didn't have the ball ever. They ran twice a possession and failed miserably at every play that they ran. Cincinnati had a little bit more offense than that today. Pittsburgh's defense was relatively challenged. Some issues in there. 2 interceptions I felt that they had that they did not capitalize on, but one they did get from my new hero, T2, Trenton Thompson. The Steelers out of nowhere, backup safety, getting on the field, making plays 2 weeks in a row now. I say this with all pain and misery, considering he and I share a common bond, but I don't even know who Keanu Neal is anymore. Get his ass off the team. T2 is our guy moving forward. Really, really hope, all jokes aside, Thompson gets more action. He looks like a good player to me. A lot of things that he needs to do to stay with this team. And keep in mind, this is a defense that is playing without Minkah Fitzpatrick. He might be the most important guy that's out there, not named Watt. TJ Watt, by the way, a strip sack, 2 sacks in this game, one in which the Bengals hilariously decided literally to not block Watt. It looked as if the tackle and the tight end, neither of them wanted that smoke. Watt goes right in. It's a key down at the end of the game. Watt goes right in, makes another sack. But you talk to Bengals fans, he's the dirtiest player in the world, which I think is hilarious. I have absolutely no idea where they realistically get that, except for the fact that they think every Steelers player is dirty. They tackle too hard. They hit too hard. They hit him pretty hard today. Not probably as much as they would have liked. I thought it was a good defensive effort. They missed opportunities in a similar vein to the offense. They tipped 2 passes that both somehow landed right into Jamar Chase's lap, who took both of them for extra yards, including one that ended up setting up a touchdown, their only touchdown in this game. Sometimes you don't get the breaks. I did have issues, certainly at the middle of the game, with some of what they did. Had issues tackling. Chandon Sullivan blew a sack that ended up being a big play for the Bengals. We can break that down in a little bit more detail when I get a chance to evaluate the game. You're listening to the New Standard Podcast. My name is Neal Coulong. T2 is a dog. Love the guy. I want more T2. Steelers versus Arizona next week, back in the friendly confines of Acra-Heinz Fieldium. Very excited about that. I oftentimes disagree with most of what Gene Steratore says, because he pretty much only agrees with whatever was called on the field, whatever the obvious play is. I was surprised. He said the Steelers should have challenged this. In his words, and I'm paraphrasing, in his words, the Steelers had a good chance to win that challenge. Is that enough? To be honest with you, I'm not 1,000% sure they would have. When the NFL, which is supposed to be using replay to confirm the call on the field, that's the written rule. When instead they use it to re-officiate the play, which is what happens every single time. Well, you look at it from this angle and you see this, and they slow everything down. It's not how the official on the field saw it. You're supposed to be looking for something that is blatantly obvious to 10 guys in the bar watching it. They all agree that this should be overturned. That's the standard of it. If you can't do that, it shouldn't be overturned. And in my opinion, I don't think there's enough there to really say they absolutely would have overturned it. Looks to me like he gets a third foot down, which brings out the football move thing. You don't have to survive the ground. But we have seen plenty of times that despite the fact the survive the ground rule does not exist anymore, they still stick with it. So should they have challenged it? I would have liked to have seen him challenge it, just because that drive was so good. I would have liked to have seen him get rewarded for that. Didn't work that way. But yes, I agree with this in the sense that this is a 50-50 shot. You are still inside the 20 and your offense is rolling. I don't think Jaylen Warren has fumbled, has he? If he did, they didn't lose it. I don't really remember it. A really tough fumble to end what was otherwise an excellent drive. Another part that I wanted to bring up with that, I tweeted at one point, it was probably the best 13-play series the Steelers offensive line had all year. That may not sound like much, but to those who have watched this team, it's a damn miracle. They never look good play to play to start a game. That's important because, generally speaking, depends on the team. They script their first 10, 12, 15 plays. These are what we're going to run in neutral situations. In other words, if it's 4th and 1 and we decide to go for it, we're not going to go to the next play on the list. We have a package for that. To script out your plays is to say, this week in practice, we are going to run the hell out of these 15 plays. If we don't run any play well for the rest of the game, it's not going to be in these 15. We're going to have these down pat. That's how you set up the rest of the game, how you're going to call things, what you're noticing, who on the other team can run, who got hurt, who looks terrible that day, whatever. They gather a lot of information based on the results of those 15 plays, and they want the control variable to be as tight as possible, which is to say, these plays we have run like an army. This is boot camp with these 15 plays. It's marching. We better have these things down pat. For the sake of this season, the Steelers' offensive line hasn't run maybe more than 2 plays of their first 15 in which it looks like they know what they're doing. We will review it, we will evaluate it, and look more into what exactly happened. But the Steelers' offensive line, I thought, played remarkably well. And I'm not saying it's necessarily the best that they've played all year, but the floor was at like an actual NFL offensive level. That hasn't happened all year. That's the anti-Canada effect. I don't know what happened, but for somebody that was very much saying Pat Myers, the Steelers offensive line coach, Pat Myers, needs to go as well, I'm kind of turned around on that. Clearly, there was something in how they're preparing going into games that is messing up their line. Get Canada out of the way, and all of a sudden, they look like a pretty good unit. Wasn't the best game for them. Some problems. But it's an athletic unit. It's one that can get a lot better as well. And the Steelers dominated this game by and large up front, I thought. They ran the ball very well. They controlled the game well. They lacked execution in some key situations. And they only scored 16 points, which isn't very good. Overall, for where they have been, for where their average is this season, the offensive line played very well. And to me, that's probably the biggest takeaway that involves Matt Canada. Their script, their first 15 plays was sharper, more reasonable for what they're doing. It made more sense than any other point in, certainly this season, and maybe longer than that. They came out very well overall over 2 drives, and really should have had 10 points out of those 2 drives. Frustrating that did not happen, but as Mike Tomlin would say, the arrow is pointed up for the Steelers on offense. I rambled a lot longer than I thought I was going to. I wanted to get you guys comments, so let's see them. Hit me up with something here. My name is Neal Coulong. When you spell it incorrectly, it still sounds the same. Now, I wanted to get into this as well, just because I made a comment about this in social media. You may hate Antonio Brown. You may be sickened by Antonio Brown. I was chided professionally by somebody who suggested that we shouldn't ever cover Antonio Brown anymore for the things that he did. I'm not his defense attorney. I'm not his brother. I'm kind of thankful for that. I think he's got some problems. I will say this, as far as the Steelers go, and yes, I'm including TJ Watt in this, Antonio Brown is the hardest working player the team has had in 30 years. You absolutely could not question his effort on a football field. There is no way in hell Antonio Brown would have done what Deontay Johnson did today. I don't like being, there's no way this guy would have done that guy, okay? Jack Lambert today would get plastered if he played. That's physical reality. It's not the point. Comparing one player to another, especially from different eras, generally is not a good idea. But that doesn't change the fact that you got 110% out of a player every single game. Deontay Johnson, the last 2 seasons, made more money than Antonio Brown did in a single season. Johnson isn't even top 15 at his position right now. Granted, he's not getting a whole lot of opportunities, but could have held on to the ball in the end zone. You know, probably needed to do that. Made some nice plays today. Went backwards, seemed to break his own ankle and lost 6 yards on a pass play. I don't know how he managed to do that. He's not Antonio Brown, but Antonio Brown also outworks him to a large degree. Antonio Brown is the epitome of Steeler football in the romanticized, kind of hokey way fans always want to bring that up, but they hate him off the field. I can't question that, but you can't question Antonio Brown on the field. I know that. And Deontay Johnson reminded me of that in this game. And it's really unfortunate that they can't find a receiver who wants to make $25 million a year and give his full effort and not pout after touchdown calls don't go his way. Steelers at 7-4. Playoff picture looks very good for them where they are sitting now. In a good position for the wild card, one of the wild cards. And I understand that shouldn't really be all that hard to earn a wild card spot nowadays. That's how the Steelers have been in the playoffs the last 3 years, whatever it is. The Ravens at 8-3. They're on a bye this week, right? Ravens don't play today, do they? They are a half game right now behind Cleveland. Somebody wants to give me an update on that game. I shouldn't date this as much as I am. I'm just not in front of my TV at the moment. It's going to be a battle. They split with Cleveland. Division record is going to come down there. May end up in a 3-way tie within the division, which is all kinds of crazy. To do that, the Steelers would have swept the Ravens and the Bengals and split with the Browns, giving them a 5-1 record in the division. I would imagine that would give them the division title if the scenario exists in which Baltimore, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh would all finish at the top of the AFC North. Maybe the most competitive division in football this season. Mike Tomlin is not the only person who pays players. I know that you want to blame Mike Tomlin for absolutely everything. Mike Tomlin is also not the guy who dropped the ball in the field. He's not the guy who half-assed a play. He's not the guy who had his back turned to a fumble, which should be inexcusable if you were not engaged in a block with somebody. They paid Deontay market level. I wish they could get more out of him, but I would like to point out the obvious. They fired their offensive coordinator this week, and that's a move they haven't done since 1941. So maybe they think he's being underutilized. I don't know, maybe 16 points a game is not all the fault of the salary of the wide receiver. He got a market level deal for what players of his level of targets, of stats in general, that's what they get paid. I don't think they are going to want to pay that again next season. They could probably find somebody that's a little bit more invested in what they're trying to do. That's just me. Overpaid in the NFL is just the dumbest thing. I don't want to hear it. You don't know what those guys do game in and game out for how much money owners are making. They're not getting overpaid. Okay. They're not even close to being paid what's probably fair. I like this simply because I'm going to use it to segue into the end of our show here. I went over a little bit. I appreciate your comments. Thank you all for tuning in. You have been listening to the New Standard Podcast. I'm Neal Coulong. Lance Williams will be back with me on Wednesday when we are going to break down the rest of this game, plus give you a bit of a preview of the pesky Arizona Cardinals who come to Akron-Heinz Fieldium in Week 13. Steelers, big win today. Victory Sunday. Enjoy it, Steeler Nation. I'm Neal Coulong. We'll talk to you Wednesday.